I approach the question of translation from, my activism, not from a academic curiosity or abstract curiosity. And I was looking at the notion of protection when I was looking at effectively increased police violence, increased state violence, imperialism, racial capitalism, the state of permanent war that we live in all its form, not just the war, imperialist war, or the war like in Ukraine, but also environmental war, the war, that poverty bring, and all this situation that we even saw during the pandemic, the kind of war, who had the access to health services or to vaccine and who did not have access to that. So we are facing multiple crises, but which are an uneven relation to each other, but of an inextricable entanglement that we also notice. So what do we do, with that? And I was looking at protection, at the question of the vocabulary around protection, as I observe, the increasing laws and discourse and narrative about protection that justify, militarization of border, construction of enclave in which the rich and bourgeois live, the surveillance, the camera everywhere, the drone, the construction of those who deserve protection versus those who do not deserve protection because of different reasons, essentially also racism. The increasing private army, private guard, we see all this, everywhere we see this man, usually Black or Asian men standing, guarding whatever shops or university. The laws also that are, and I can think in France, the law against what is called separatism, to protect France, the Republic, the laws against the veiled woman, to protect a woman. And the last even situation where an imam is, was condemned to be expelled for reason that he could have been taken to the tribunal because he was accused of anti-Semitic and sexist attack. And there are laws against that. But then it was like seen as a danger, a threat to the Republic. So all this discourse against a threat at a moment of increasing brutality and violence. So protection on the one hand, that will justify increased brutality and increased violence. So that's what interested me. I was also interested in the colonial history of protection and how effectively colonialism, needed to protect itself and how therefore it criminalized for instance, also form of sexuality, form of families, and form of, all this. How the master house was a patriarchal, white Christian house that needed to be protected, and at the same time connected also to the wider world, through bank and insurance, because to sell the product, sugar or cotton or tobacco. So at the same time, this totally protected, and we know that circulation was forbidden. The enslaved and the slave could not circulate freely, but the master could circulate and his capital was circulating freely. So again, all this and all the law against circulation, freedom of circulation, and not just circulation of capital, but also circulation of body that we see again today in Europe with Fortress Europe and all the dead people, in the Mediterranean, the Channel, or in the mountain, or on the road, and the camps that are multiplying, or even, for instance, the notion of hybrid war that we heard last December when thousands of refugees were caught on the Belarus-Poland border and harassed and attacked both by the Belarus police and by the police from Poland, and the Polish government talking about hybrid war. And this with the European Parliament siding with the Polish government. For all this, all this question of protection, so the way protection has become this. And then for me, it has always been important to think also of what Aimé Césaire had talked about as called the boomerang effect of colonialism. And calling in his discourse on colonialism published in 1950 already. And he said that no no country can colonize or enslave innocently. It will come back. It will come back to Europe. And of course, as we know, Césaire was talking about Hitlerism and Nazism, saying that that has been done to other people in the world, to brown and black people, and this was done now to white people, and that was a scandal. So whatever we think of that theory, what my mean is what also I think Boaventura was talking about, the decolonization of Europe itself. That decolonization is not just for the colonized, it's also for those who have colonized. And that process of decolonization, especially the decolonization of the left, that Césaire, was calling for. And this is why he resigned from the French Communist Party in 1956, because he thought he was, just saying that the Communist Party did not want to decolonize himself. So itself as being effectively carrying the idea of the proletariat, and so it had nothing to do with, colonialism and racism. So all this question was, how do we deal with that? How the increasing cruelty and violence against women, feminicide, but also against children, the criminalization of children, not only in Palestine and elsewhere, but also in Europe. I mean, studies show that, for instance, a Roma girl are treated as adult women in the prison or in the social system, and also Black and Arab young men. So this, again, this question, but also the people, the trans people, the queer, the sex workers, who are made vulnerable to premature death, justified, I borrow from Bruce Wilson Gilmore, a theory about racism that is a state-sanctioned fabrication of vulnerability to premature death. So that fabrication that justify, in fact, the premature death. These people die, and this is, how it happened. So how to bring it back protection as an anti-capitalist, anti-patriarchal, anti-imperialist, and anti-racist struggle, not to let it in the hand of the state and the police and the tribunal. So this is what I will talk about, although I would just want to make a remark, because before, just 2 days ago, I had to write a foreword to a collection about translation by young women, young translators of migrant background. And they were talking mostly about the question of translation as work, underpaid, undervalued, and also what they were facing in the publishing world of, what was seen as good, as words to be translated, and what was seen as, why should we translate that? It does not. So that also, this question of frequently very much, of course, around also patriarchy, racism, and colonialism. What are the texts that deserve to be translated? So the politics of translation also, it's related to an economy dominated by, the white elite on translation. But back to the question of protection. You may certainly remember this song that went viral around the world, Un Violero on Camino, which with this woman of Chile, Daphne Valdez, Paola Cometa, Sibila Sotomayor, and Lea Cáceres wrote. And that was, and I quote some of the song, the rapist is you, it's the cop, the judge, the state, the president. Patriarchy is a judge that imprisons us at birth. And our punishment is this violence you now see. It's femicide, impunity for my killer, it's disappearance, it's rape. And it's not my fault, nor where I was, nor what I wore. The rapist was you. The rapist is you. It's the cop, the judge, the state, the president. The oppressive state is a macho rapist. And I thought that was for me very important, because they were connected effectively. Who are truly responsible for femicide and rape, the police and the state and the judge. They sang mark a refusal, they did not want, they challenged the question of, women protection. And they declare, we categorically refuse to say that the Chilean police ensure women's safety. And we know that during the huge protest in Chile, and we have seen it also in Egypt and elsewhere, the violence against women. As the philosopher Elsa Dorna has argued, given that the state is, I quote, the principal instigator of inequality, and considering that it is precisely the one who arms those who beat us, there is no point appealing to it for justice, because it is precisely the first instance that institutionalizes social injustice. So what is a protection for racialized body, female body, poor body, or young body who have less value in this phase of necroliberal reactivation when they are sacrificable? And we know that this question of those who are not protected, who can be sacrificed, is expanding outside also of just the racialized and bodies that we saw with the Yellow Jacket in France, right? The incredible police violence against the Yellow Jacket. So we see how this, in fact, is being extended. But then the black and brown body are the first to be killed. The state condenses all the form of imperialist, patriarchal, and capitalist oppression exploitation. The state as an institution is thus far from playing a small part in the organization and perpetuation of violence against women, the poor, and the racialized. The patriarchal revival of recent years is inextricably linked to neoliberal capitalism. And I was thinking of that because, at the time when Trump was president, he was presented as a totally vulgar macho, which he is, of course, but then as a kind of difference with the polite, nice bourgeois patriarch like the president of France, and the bad, like the vulgar one, who are badly dressed and slap the door in the face of the woman, and the Trump and Bolsonaro and Erdogan company. But for me, there is no difference really. I mean, this is really, in fact, there is, okay, the more polite bourgeois, we could say a macho person, and then the less. But then, in fact, they share the same objective: rolling back all the social laws, increasing vulnerability, increasing poverty, and leading imperialist war. And they support an economy that generates its own array of discrete, yet no less real form of violence. And I'm thinking of the exhaustion, what I call the economy of exhaustion, because being, I was with on the picket line of Black women striking in France, cleaning, they cleaning the hotel. And so I joined them and I listened to them, and they were talking about how the work was exhausting, absolutely exhausting their bodies. And that it's a form of slow and silent violence. They have, they are in their 30s, they have had already surgery on their wrist, on their knees, they are absolutely exhausted. And because of the push, heavy load, they are always, bending. And they say that how effectively in hotel or all, public space, it is as if the public dirty even more this space than they would in their private apartment. So there is a connection also between this racialized body who clean and the fact that the customers, as we say, or the client, make the place even more dirty. They were describing hotel room that we could not believe. So this exhaustion, that for me is absolutely inseparable from capitalism. The question of exhaustion of the earth, of the plant, of the non-human life, but as also human life. I mean, colonial slavery was based on exhausting mine of gold, silvers, plantation of sugar, tobacco, and of course the exhaustion of bodies, black and brown bodies. So this, for me, that was the question. So how do we rethink protection? How protection is again, taken back and used as revolutionary struggle. I was thinking that all society organized form of protection for the newborn babies, for the children, for the sick, for the elderly, for the non-valid, whoever. And how the state has been gradually entrusted, and how some feminists has worked toward that, what we call carceral feminism. So the state has been entrusted with all its institution for protection. So how do we reimagine form of protection that will not involve repression, surveillance, prison, and paternalism? So as I said before, we have to study the colonial history of protection. We have to see how protection also has become also extremely important in imperialist vocabulary. I mean, we know that, for instance, if we may remember Madame Bush's speech at the United Nations, when the United States launched the war against Afghanistan, by saying, okay, we go to protect the women, who are oppressed by the Afghan men. So how this has become the question of protection, especially of women and children, has become an important part of the talk. And how this, that long history, colonial history, we see echoes today for instance, in France, in the Islamophobia, in the French state Islamophobia, the protection of the Republic from the veiled woman, as I say, but also the stigmatization, the criminalization of Black and Arabian. And in fact, the de facto, if not de jure, license to kill Black and Arab men, as we saw also elsewhere, in the United States. So how do we work for that? Okay, I'm jumping to go much faster. On March 2018 in Martinique, a French colony, post-colony, ravaged by the state crime of polluting the earth with the pesticide chlordecone, local feminists denounced a form of violence by fusing health, colonialism, racism, sexism, and environmental crime, and male-female relationship, intergenerational solidarity and resistance. So they sang, burn it down, bring disorder to bring order. Yesterday enslaved, they say, still exploited, poisoned today, the women say, enough. 2 years later, the COVID-19 pandemic was spreading around the world. The feminists in the square of Mexico City sang the following: let the state, the sky, the street tremble. Let the judge, the magistrature tremble. Today, women have lost their calm. And let the earth tremble at its core before our roars of love. So this, for me, is really the protection as effective relation, the protection as relational, the protection as a word of revolutionary love, the protection as international solidarity. This, how we, especially now, confronted with the health crisis, and all this new pandemic, and the state of permanent war, and how the war also pollute and contaminate, leave not only men bodies and of course murder and death, but also polluting, as we see now in the heart of Europe, but war has been waged around the world before the Ukraine invasion. So how do we add to the process of decolonization, also the fight for depatriarchalization, as the feminists of Central and South America have, asked for. And so how do we do that? And I think I will stop there because it's already 18 minutes that I've been talking. Thank you.